And now I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, which is part of our Leadership and Professional Development series on preventing sexual harassment in the workplace. Today's featured presenter is Ms. Susan Anderson. Susan has extensive experience as corporate counsel in the construction, value-added agriculture, and renewable fuels industries, as well as the hospitality industry. She has extensive legal and operational experience in corporate governance and compliance, equity and debt financing, human resource management and training, environmental, real estate, energy, and regulatory areas of law. She also has government affairs experience as a registered lobbyist and media relations liaison. Additionally, Susan is an adjunct professor at the University of South Dakota Beacom School of Business and leadership and development workshop facilitator throughout the United States. We are so excited to have her join us today. Susan, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you everyone for joining me on this webinar. Preventing sexual harassment in the workplace. It seems that, our media is full of it. With social media activism, with the hashtag #MeToo, it has started a view that people are not going to stand for it anymore. So let's take a view as to what sexual harassment is, some definitions, some types, and then we'll go through as to what can we do in the workplace? What are some things that managers can do and be cognizant of so that we don't have these issues? So first of all, sexual harassment is not really about sex. It's about power, or rather the abuse of power over someone in the workplace. It's gender-based. It's taking those qualities and making fun of a person. So it's that power relationship. A little history about the law regarding sexual harassment. Now, the granddaddy of all civil rights legislation, and especially Title VII, which prevented employment harassment, started with the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and through the years it's been amended. In 1980, the EEOC issued guidelines, regulatory rules, regulations stating that sexual harassment in the workplace is a form of sexual discrimination and is prohibited by Title VII. Also, our Supreme Court, through several important cases, has held that sexual harassment law, and has further enhanced the Title VII sexual harassment issues, holding that sexual harassment occurs when there are unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, or other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature, of a gender relational nature, that creates a hostile or abusive work environment. It makes people feel uncomfortable. They don't want to work. They're not putting out their best work effort. They're afraid. They're annoyed. All states also have additional laws prohibiting sexual discrimination in the workplace. So what is sexual harassment? Now, I know we've heard a lot of these definitions. There are two types. The first type is, quite blatant. We know about these issues. It's quid pro quo, meaning a tit for a tat. You do this for me, I will give you this favor. We see a lot of that with allegations with the top leader of CBS lately, and they're investigating whether these actual allegations have happened or not to go on and further do extra discipline. But it's unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature, when submission to or rejection of is used as a basis for employment decisions. So this type of sexual harassment is easy to spot. It's very much strict liability on the employer, in that when a supervisor engages in this type of quid pro quo harassment, there's no pass and go, there's no collecting $200. You are liable as an employer. And it is a power position. A person with a supervisory or managerial authority engages in that requires that the alleged harasser have authority to grant or withhold job benefits like promotions, raises, continued employment, new opportunities, and they hold that for those favors that they're seeking. So you see it's a power issue. The next type of sexual harassment is not so easy to identify. It's more fuzzy, it's a gray area, and it's called hostile work environment. Hostile work environment is an environment that is sexually intimidating, it's offensive, it's unwelcome, verbal or physical conduct that is so pervasive that it makes work difficult, makes people not want to, they're afraid to be around the person, they're constantly harassed, it's uncomfortable, it makes a team not work together well. And it's the issue of whether comments or conduct are severe enough to create a work environment that a reasonable person, that a reasonable workmate would find hostile or abusive. Comments and conduct must be unwelcome to the victim. And in a sense, the victim didn't invite those conduct or comments. And you have to look at the nonverbal aspects of this. The fact that maybe an employee tolerates it, they don't want to speak up, they don't want to be called out, maybe they may kind of laugh it off, or do diversion techniques. They don't want to seem like they don't fit in. They want to get along. It doesn't mean that they are succumbing or welcoming those comments. And you have to look at this in the environment of, for instance, hey, Michelle, nice sweater. It enhances your feminine assets. That's sexually charged. Versus, hey, Michelle, you look nice today. I like your outfit. That's a pretty color on you. That is doing more of the aspect of, the person and enhancing them, not the sexually charged issues. I've investigated things where, women also, allegedly sexually harass their male counterparts, such as, hey, Joe, bend over again and pick that up. I like the view. They create just an unwelcome atmosphere versus just getting along and being complimentary toward another person or not commenting in that aspect about the person. So to find hostile work environment sexual harassment, it's generally required that it has to be unwelcome to the victim. It's based on gender or qualities of a gender specific. The harassment is sufficiently severe or pervasive to create an abusive working environment. The harassment affects a term, a condition, or privilege of employment, just being uncomfortable in the work environment. And the employer had actual or constructive knowledge of the sexually hostile working environment and took no prompt or adequate action to stop the harassment. Well, what does this mean? The Supreme Court has issued 2 opinions that, if a supervisor hears this down the hall, they hear, chatter going on, and they don't do anything to investigate it, the company is liable for not. They should have known, they heard about it, they needed to investigate it further. Sometimes things, people make complaints of that they're being sexually harassed when after you investigate it, it really probably does not rise to the level of harassment based on gender, but you find that maybe this team, this work environment they're in, they're not getting along. So there's other issues to look at it as how can we make this team work together? What are the personality differences that we need to look at? How can we get this team to look at each other and respect each other and move off of maybe some misunderstandings? So just a common sense definition of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is deliberate or repeated sexual behavior that is not welcome, it's not requested, and it's not returned. A lot of times in some investigations that I've done, or even just doing some employee coaching, the person who has allegedly made these comments or created this environment where people are uncomfortable said, well, I didn't mean it. It was a joke. They should have known it was a joke. The whole issue is it's not what you intended. It is what the alleged victim, the people complaining, are viewing, that they find it offensive. And it's how their view and their opinion of what it is. And a lot of times we have to get that across. It's not what you intended, it's how the person perceives it and finds it that they're uncomfortable with it. So how do you comply with this law? Well, employers are under a legal duty to take steps necessary to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace. Anti-sexual harassment or harassment policies in general, and sound procedures for investigating who they can call, who they can contact, dealing with these complaints. The employer may be able to fend off costly sexual harassment verdict if an employee sues, and that does happen if the company just let things happen and did not address it. So prompt investigation, and later in my presentation I'll give you some hints as to if you have to investigate, what are some things you can do to kind of bulletproof, that the company did take corrective action, that they looked into this complaint promptly, that they will not tolerate any sexual harassment and any retaliation if someone makes a claim for this. So if an employer learns of it in the workplace, they might hear, somebody saying, gee, Joe is really being offensive and some of his jokes aren't that funny. Maybe some coaching with Joe and find out what is Joe saying that people are finding to be a little uncomfortable. Talking to workers, prompt, decisive steps must be taken. Just merely turning your head creates a whole opening for lawsuits because the environment was uncomfortable. So an employer also required to take corrective action if employees are being sexually harassed, having uncomfortable comments, areas of people who come into the workplace, clients, patients, customers, suppliers, delivery people. For instance, a lot of times I've had people call me about, well, some of our delivery trucks, and they make kind of some comments to our female people who are working on the docks. How do we handle this? You need to talk to those suppliers, so that, and tell them we don't accept this kind of environment. A lot of times, sometimes you will get in, I investigated a situation where the actual manager of kind of a bowling alley, and they had a bar area connected to it. Some bowlers came in and they were being quite vocal and boisterous to the wait staff, who happened to be female. The manager could see that was creating an uncomfortable environment for his wait staff. So what did he do? He went over and he started to handle that group, and he put the female wait staff in a different area. But he also compensated them for the tips that they may have lost from that large group. So he took action, okay? And he let those people know, hey, this is not the environment for this. Other considerations for management. It should stop from top management down that zero tolerance for any sexual harassment and retaliation toward the alleged victim is occurring. And all employees should understand that it's simply not tolerated. The anti-sexual harassment policy distributed to each employee, and I like to have it as when you're onboarding or you're doing some continuing training, which I recommend doing periodically for all of the employees, is have them sign that they acknowledged that this is the policy for sexual harassment. They've had this training on it, sign it, date it, and put it in their employee file. Also on having the policy in the employee handbook, but having that specifically brought out raises that issue that, zero tolerance, top management down, we do not accept this. Providing sexual harassment training, like I said, new employees, but also ongoing employee training. A lot of times, some of your seasoned employees forget some of those nuances and that respect, and they get a little lackadaisical because they know each other, they can kid around, but just it's a good reminder, to always treat everyone with respect. Also, your supervisory staff, managerial staff, take these incidents seriously. Just don't brush them off. Have those conversations if they hear and they need to investigate more. Also, the immediacy. That's what's important, and that's what some of these U.S. Supreme Court opinions said. That immediacy issue is so important to bulletproof the corporate from having any allegations that they did nothing. Some of the guidelines for the investigation. What do you do? How do you handle some of these things? What are some techniques? And first and foremost, as I've kind of said, the investigation should be conducted even where no formal complaint has been made. Supervisors or managers may know or suspect of something. They hear it. The water cooler talk, the gossip, pay attention to that. That's kind of telling of what your environment of your workplace is about. So I like to think of promptly investigating this, no later than 2 days, after they become aware of sexual harassment may have occurred. And selection of who the investigator should be. And I like to do a team approach and having a male gender, female gender, having that as kind of looking that you're more objective, that you're not slighted toward one gender versus another. And some things about the investigator. Sometimes your environment may be a small working environment that you may have to hire someone from outside to come in and make that investigation. So when you're selecting the investigator, consider, is it a person who is in a position higher in the company than the alleged harasser, who can make these decisions, who can make these assessments? You have to look at, are there special friendships of who this investigator is with maybe the alleged victim, the alleged harasser? Will they be objective? Will they be fair? Are they able to discuss some of these private, maybe sexual conduct and attitudes without embarrassment and, with sensitivity? And they can't be intimidating to the employees. Like, you probably don't want the CEO to be investigating it with, some common line area employees. That would be a very intimidating avenue. And like I said, gender is important, kind of the equal gender. And also with the investigative team, you're going to be interviewing people. And one person is going to be, making notes. As a lawyer, it's always, our key thing is to document. Well, a lot of times you may be, writing it down and you're not looking at the nonverbal aspects of the person you're interviewing, whereas the other team member can watch that and can sense that. And also, two heads are better than one. You're coming at it from two perspectives to gain kind of, what has really happened here and what has factually gone on, that you can kind of make a better assessment. Also, just as an aside, whenever you are in a meeting with an employee, and just never sit in an area where you're blocking the doorway, because there have been allegations where people have felt that they couldn't leave at any time, and then they make claims of, false imprisonment. it has happened, but make them feel that they can have easy access to that door, even though it's a closed door situation, that they're not feeling blocked in, that they're feeling forced to be there. That's just as an aside, kind of a practical matter. And document, and anything, and what are the facts? Not your opinions, but the facts. Who heard this? Who are witnesses? Who is the alleged, victim? Who is the alleged harasser? What happened? When did it happen? Where did it happen? And how did this situation, occur? Treat this documentation as confidential company information. You cannot tell a person that you can guarantee confidentiality. You cannot do that. What you can say is only people who are on a need-to-know basis, will know the basis of what this investigation is about. You don't guarantee that they can view the documentation. That you don't give them that opportunity, but that you will keep it as confidential as possible. And here's kind of an aside too. If you are dealing with a sensitive issue, a sensitive meeting, whether it's a sexual harassment investigation or another employee matter, look around you at the environment, because the gossip train, the water cooler talk is huge. Plan any type of meeting where it's a sensitive issue, because people watch who's going. Oh, someone's going to the lawyer's office. Uh-oh, John Doe is going to HR. I wonder what's up with him. And that creates the gossip train. Sometimes we've had to rent office space off-site and actually have someone discreetly bring people to that conference room off-site to hold our investigation, because maybe the environment is that everybody sees who's everybody going, and you bring in a couple people, we're going to use this office, we need to have some meetings, and you see selective people going in and out. That creates more gossip. So you don't want that happening. You want to be as discreet as possible. So, keep the investigation documentation separate from employee files. Sometimes when I've had to investigate within the company setting that I was employed as corporate lawyer, I would take my notes home with me, just to, people clean. Maybe you don't have a locked area. They see what's on desks. They notice things. They notice people passing by, going to certain offices, closed door things. So discretion to try to keep it, as minimum of people noticing as possible. If you find that the alleged harasser indeed committed some type of harassment, then what you put in his or her employee file is a short explanation of the complaint. Bullet points suffice. The results that yes, there was, truth to this, comments made, hostile work environment created, and the corrective action taken. And that should all be included in the file. But you keep your other documents, the other documentation that you have created for this investigation separate. Interviewing. When you're talking to people, it takes a lot of, tact, patience, objectivity. People cry. People get very defensive. People maybe laugh it off. People deny it. People said, but I didn't mean it that way. It's not how you may have meant that comment or those continual comments to me to be. It's how it was perceived by that person. You cannot make promises as to how the investigation will be handled. You can make promises that, will be objective. We will try to be discreet. You cannot guarantee total confidentiality, like I said, because there will be certain, people who need to know, your higher management, they will need to know just factually what happened and what your determination will be. And you must be firm that any retaliation by anybody involved will not be tolerated. Examples of this are maybe people are witnesses to it and they come out of the meeting and they kind of harass that person who has made the complaint or who has been subjected to that harassment and make comments to them. Well, thanks a lot, or look what you're doing to such and such career. That's retaliation. And you cannot tolerate retaliation from either of the parties that are involved. So that is very important. Also, in your investigations, don't use explosive or emotionally laden terms like, there's been an allegation of sexual harassment or sexual abuse. Use your questioning as to, we've heard about this incident, or there have been comments made at kind of this time frame, but be very open and general in your description. And usually, especially with witnesses, they're forthright. They'd be like, yeah, this has been going on. Bob and Jane have been doing that, but, it's harmless. Or, yeah, they just don't get along. Or, we haven't been getting along as a team for a while. And you'll get a lot of information as to, is it really a harassment issue, or is it just people not getting along as well? That does not give a rise to the sexual harassment issue. But don't ask yes or no questions. Be very general. And also, observe. If you have time before you actually are able to start investigating this, if you can be discreet and observe how they get along in the workplace, can you see, that there is tension, that there's not, or is there a good common bond? That'll be telling too. It's kind of that nonverbal of how, the workday is progressing. Also, after you've completed your investigation, perhaps you can kind of watch to see, are they getting along better? Is there activities that would give rise to maybe some retaliation that's going on? Watch that. Watch those nonverbal things. Like I said, your questioning should be open-ended. You don't have to, use those sexually charged words, but let people talk. And sometimes they will begin to talk more, and you learn more about what's going on. And at the conclusion of the investigation, you need to take that immediate disciplinary action. If the investigation reveals that no sexual harassment in fact occurred, record that conclusion in that investigation notes. You inform both parties at the conclusion. You remind them that any form of retaliation would not be tolerated. And also you remind them, no matter what the outcome of the investigation was, the investigator needs to keep an eye on kind of what's going on. Like I've said, just looking at the demeanor of the parties. And sometimes you have to look at the severity, like what kind of discipline are we going to give to the person who in fact, has made this environment unwelcome. And maybe it's, you can say it includes up to and including termination. It depends on what the situation gives rise to. And you can tell the victim as to, disciplinary action has occurred, and you don't have to tell them what exactly it was that happened, but just, we take these actions seriously, and this is what our conclusion was. And you don't have to be specific. Sometimes the person who is the alleged victim will not want this to proceed further, or they didn't actually make it known to management of the complaint, and they're just like, man, I just want to get along. I don't want this to happen. It was just a misunderstanding. You have to still remind them that the company does not tolerate this type of activity. you want to continue further just doing some investigation to make sure, in fact, that this isn't an unwelcome environment, that we don't have quid pro quo sexual harassment going on. We want people to get along in our work environment, that we want things to happen and people to enjoy each other. And because we are spending most of our time, our waking life, in a work environment with other people. And that also I get questions on, well, what about dating? You know, is dating okay, or is that viewed as sexual harassment? Well, you know, it depends. You know, like I said, most of our waking hours are spent in the workplace. Where are we going to meet people that we might want to enjoy a friendship with or something else? It's okay to ask a person out on a date. If they say no, then leave it at that. If they continue to keep asking and asking and asking, that may give rise to making that person feel uncomfortable. They're saying no, but the alleged harasser is not taking that as no, leave me alone, let's move on, let's just be co-workers together. So, you know, it's that line that we want to be friends. We want to do things in and out of the work environment, but it just can't be in a sexually demeaning and a power situation. I've investigated situations that just didn't give rise to sexual harassment. The head of, she was female, and, you know, odd things happened. She offered her male coworker in her department clothes from her newly deceased husband. Yes, I know it sounds weird, but he was offended with that, and he gave rise to a complaint that he thought he was sexually harassed. You know, we found out after interviewing the department that the personalities weren't getting along. They needed just, you know, some other training, team building, some review of getting along with each other. I've had issues where it's blatantly a CEO comes in. We have administrative person putting things away and was on her hands and knees because of the cabinetry was, you know, low. And he comes in and he says, yes, I tell my wife that's how I like my women, on their hands and knees. You know, blatant sexual harassment. Gets reported, we do the investigation, and the victim, she's like, I just want an apology and not to have this happen again. So, you know, we go through that, and the CEO made a very personal, heartfelt apology, and we had to send him to some sensitivity training outside of, you know, the company, because it is top down, you know, and we want an environment that is welcoming to all. So those are some examples. Watch in your environment of things that you're planning as team building. Situations such as male-only golf outings. I live in an environment where, you know, where hunting is a big pastime. There have been situations in companies that I've actually worked for where it was the male managers all went on, you know, a pheasant hunting excursion, and the females of the same management or even higher management level were left to plan the event and not partake in the event. And, you know, that just creates that hostile work environment, that gender difference. Tickets to events. You know, look at it, is it just a, you know, one gender specific thing that only one gender tends to like that more versus the other? Look at events that everybody, you know, would enjoy. I've even investigated things where, yes, they've had meetings, and as part of the entertainment, you know, strippers were brought in. You know, those are those blatant things that just, you know, it's not the old boy network anymore. So it's a situation of, we want everyone welcome. We want everyone to enjoy where they work, because we're all in this together. We have an environment we all want to, do well, and for our families, for our communities and things like that. So we see a lot of the hashtag Me Too, the social media activism. Just today, we've seen some of the primaries in our elections. Right now, we have a record of women who have won their primary elections in races. Also, we had our first transgender person win the primary in Vermont for governor. So we are looking more at the issues that the person believes and stands up for versus the gender identity of that person and whether we like them or not. So we are coming a long way in our country, and that is good. So with that, I guess I could turn it to Kelly to see if, we have any questions and, anything you would like to ask.
Thank you so much, Susan. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to type those in now. We will remain on the line for the next few minutes and answer any questions you may have on the topic. I also want to encourage you all to contact your local New Horizons for further information on all of our Center for Leadership and Development courses. We offer you complimentary webinars such as the one you just viewed. So if you visit our website at newhorizons.com, you can do a zip code search to find the center nearest you. You can also view all of our courses under our Center for Leadership and Development and all of our upcoming complimentary webinars. Also, a quick reminder, this session is being recorded, and I will send you all the recording link later today to review the session as well as a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation. Well, Susan, it looks like we don't have any questions. I think you covered so much, and I just want to thank you again for your time and joining us and speaking on behalf of New Horizons today.
Well, thank you, Kelly, and thank you everyone who has been on this seminar. I look forward to, hearing from you more, and I hope you have a wonderful day and enjoy each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and thanks again, everyone. You may now log off. That will end today's session. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.